Hello, my name is Greg Kasarik and I'm going to briefly explain to you why I believe that transcendent compounds are currently legal in the state of Victoria for religious and spiritual purposes. Now, most people, when they first hear me say that, are going to say, no, not the case. Clearly, transcendent compounds are illegal within Victoria and pretty much everywhere else in the world. And you'd be half right. The Drugs, Poisons and Controlled Substances Act of 1981 does make these substances illegal. However, there actually is another piece of law that is appropriate and needs to be referred to in this particular discussion. That law is the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities Act 2006. It is that law that provides guarantees for the civil freedoms of all Victorians. It's section 14 of that law that tells us that anyone residing in the state of Victoria has the right to believe what makes sense to them and the right to engage in practices that bring those beliefs to life. They have the right to engage in those practices in public, or as an individual or as a community. So, effectively, everyone in the state of Victoria has religious freedoms that would be the envy of anybody in the world. Now, those religious freedoms are not absolute. They can be taken away from us, and they can be taken away from us in two circumstances. Firstly, the Charter is itself just a piece of law. It's not a constitution or anything like that, so it can be amended by an Act of Parliament. So if the parliamentarians wish to, they could just totally gut the entire Act. In addition, Section 31 of the Victorian Charter will actually allow the parliamentarians to exclude any particular legislation that they wish from a particular Act. So if they wanted to, the Victorian parliamentarians could pass a law that would mean that the poisons and the drugs law, Drugs, Poisons, Controlled Substances Act, was excluded from the Charter. But the problem in doing that is that they would actually be admitting that I'm right and they don't have any other way to stop me. So it would be quite a useless activity anyway. The other way that they can do it is through Section 7 of the Charter. Now, Section 7 is the section that tells us that not every right is absolute, and I think everyone will appreciate that. My right to swing my arm, swing my fist, ends at your nose. In other words, I might have a right to do something, but not if it hurts anybody else. So Section 7 tells us that the government requires a demonstrably justifiable reason in order to rescind our religious freedoms. And this is where the science comes in. This is where the actual decades of research into these substances comes and shows us which path is the right path. Because demonstrably justifiable means they have to demonstrate it. They have to be able to stand up in a court of law and say, well, these are the reasons. Here is our evidence that these compounds should be made illegal. The problem is that transcendent compounds are non-addictive, non-toxic, and psychologically safe in an appropriate dose, set, and setting. In other words, there simply is no demonstrably justifiable reason for making these compounds illegal for religious and spiritual purposes. It just doesn't exist. The Victorian government cannot stand up in court and point to any valid reason for these compounds being illegal. Now, certainly, they can argue that these compounds should not be legal for recreational purposes. And to be honest with you, there's actually quite a significant number of and portion of the community of users who would actually 100% agree. But what they can't do is they can't say that these should not be illegal. Correction, these should not be legal for religious purposes. Now, let's have a look at LSD as an example. I was raised thinking that LSD was the most evil and vilest of drugs. It would melt my brain. It would make me mad. It would do all sorts of things and would turn me into a fundamental waste of space. Now, there are probably some viewers who will think that I already am a fundamental waste of space, in which case, well, maybe you're right. However, the reality is that LSD is non-addictive. It's non-toxic. In fact, in terms of toxicity, there's been only one recorded lethal overdose of LSD in its entire human history, the 7 years that it's been around. One recorded LSD fatality. Compare this to alcohol. Now, alcohol, each year in Australia, kills about 3,000 people. Each year in Australia, it's responsible for, each year in Victoria, it's responsible for around about 9,000 ambulance call-outs. Each year in Victoria, the last figures I saw was around about 25,000 hospital admissions. So if you want to talk about alcohol danger versus LSD danger, I think it's pretty obvious which is the actual danger drug. The one with the monopoly is the danger drug. In terms of psychological harm, again, LSD has not been demonstrated to cause any kind of psychological trauma. Certainly, yes, if you take 10 tabs of LSD and you've never had it before, you are pretty much going to run into trouble. But then again, if I get onto a 1000cc motorbike and I've never ridden a motorbike before, I'm probably also going to run into trouble. The reality is that, if you do something stupid, then you'll end up coming to harm. And that applies for any kind of drug. And the number of, young people that we see vomiting in the streets and being picked up, getting into, all sorts of strife on Friday and Saturday night shows that is well and truly the case for alcohol. In terms of alcohol's psychological harm, it hugely connects with domestic violence and aggression, and it's not even safe to walk the streets late at night. So it's not about, I'm not saying this because I'm wanting to, demonise alcohol more than it already is, but I'm just pointing out the simple truth. On one hand, you've got one compound, which is a monopoly compound, which is entirely legal. On the other hand, you've got another compound, which is safe, and it's the safe one that you've made illegal. It's the safe one that gets demonised, not the dangerous one. Now, this is relevant because it comes back to demonstrably justifiable reasons. Because if the government wishes to provide a demonstrably justifiable reason for making LSD or any of the other transcendent compounds illegal, then basically they need to compare it to what the community standard is. The community standard is, of course, the monopoly drug, alcohol. So, if the government wishes to stand up in court, they've got to demonstrate that alcohol is a safer drug than LSD. And I can tell you right now, that's just not going to happen. So, just to sum up, transcendent compounds are non-addictive, non-toxic, and psychologically safe in an appropriate dose, set, and setting. Yes, if you do something stupid, you can get harmed by them. However, the government needs a demonstrably justifiable reason in order to rescind our religious and spiritual freedoms. Given the safety of transcendent compounds, there simply is no demonstrably justifiable reason for doing so. And as such, the Victorian Charter of Human Rights Responsibilities overrides the Drugs, Poisons, Controlled Substances Act, and unless they can prove otherwise, and do so in a court of law, all the way up to the High Court, then as far as I'm concerned, the use of transcendent compounds in the state of Victoria is 100% legal. And I'm inviting the government, as I have for the last 2 years, more than 2 years, I'm inviting, arrest me, come on, bring it on. If you have an argument, tell me what it is. If you have something to prove, if you've got your demonstrably justifiable reason, get it out from under the bucket. Show everybody what it is. And let's have a bit of a conversation, because I'm not going away. And neither are the people who are supporting you. We are here to stay. And we're going to change the world, one mushroom at a time. Thank you very much.